Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few people get together, gathering the ideas like we gather rocks to make a fire. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. So we're going to be making part 2 of, what did you say it should be titled, Reed?
Shatterproof.
Shatterproof. This is a story based around sort of the idea of medieval colonization of the Americas. So there is near or around the Black Plague. Either that will come in as part of the story or that will have just been being done, or I'm not quite sure where we're at. But so the idea being that we basically colonized America, the Americas, called Vinland. Is that what you said, Seth?
Yeah, I believe that's what the Vikings, who would have come across it years before Columbus, would have made reference to going from Greenland down over and then south to Vinland.
Okay, so we'll just call it Vinland then. But there they met the still quite powerful native Vinland natives. The Mayan nation is still quite powerful and prestigious. There are castles on the hills. There are knights in shining armor. There are fiefdoms. There are lords and ladies. This is the Middle Ages. The only thing that there isn't is washing. No one washes themselves, as is proper for the Middle Ages. The currency or the economic system is called glass. Basically it breaks down to be a barter trade system. There's a certain type of sand that when you perform a specific alchemical combination with an element like iron or copper or silver, it combines together and forms it's kind of like a not transparent, it's more of a translucent glass that has all the strength and all the properties of its former element, but is much easier to tote and carry. And so people make stained glass windows out of it and people sell it and trade it. So it's kind of a commodities based thing. And the purer you get, the better, higher quality, and more transparent it is. There's one glass mint or smith in Vinland, kind of like in the Plymouth Rock area of what's technically what we would consider New England, but you understand. And the glass is imported the special sand is imported via ships from Egypt, because the sand around the pyramids is this kind of glass, and the head of the glass smith or mint is really what would be is, I'm imagining the story's going to revolve around him basically sending explorers off to because we kind of have colonized everything up to the Mississippi. He's going to send explorers off to try and find more, if there's other places where this sand exists. Because there's, rumors and legends and things come from the other sides of these wildernesses that we don't really understand. So we've heard legends of things. So he's going to send some people out to basically find a new supply, because he doesn't want to. It takes like 6 or 8 months for it to be shipped from Egypt. Longer than that, more like 12 months or so. And then Reed's unique vehicle is what did you call it again, Reed? I keep forgetting.
The sand speeder. The
sand speeder, which runs, if I understand what you're saying correctly, runs on this sand and is able to manipulate the polar wave, therefore basically ignoring gravity. So it can sort of move across a hovercraft that can kind of move across the ground very quickly or over water, and it'll make, I'm sure, its entrance at some point, because if people knew that it existed, they just wouldn't have boats anymore. But anyways, what story elements that was what we had last week. So we kind of set up the whole world, and now we're on to this week. So what did you guys have?
I have hero.
What was that?
I had Hero's Sidekick.
You had Hero's Sidekick? I had Prophecy.
So are you going to go first then, Levi, so we know what's going on?
Sure. So I was thinking about the fact that the Vikings were the first here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And didn't they also have in their mythology, the idea of a rainbow road?
Ooh, yeah.
Like a rainbow bridge that would bring them...
Yeah, wherever they needed to go, right? So basically, the prophecy is partly based on recounts and retellings of some of the first Vikings who were here, and then kind of picked up by and carried on by some of the natives who talk about both rainbow light and a rainbow road. Some sort of complex combination of colors that brings destruction or brings salvation. And like when the natives, when they bury their dead, they bury them with like rainbows painted across their faces, you know? When their warriors go into battle, they go into battle with rainbows painted across their faces. When a warrior is sent into like on a death mission, like a suicide assassination mission, he goes in. If they fight a fight and one of their opponents fights very well, when they do finally end up killing him, they paint a rainbow on his face. So it's somehow connected. The idea of this road is somehow connected to maybe the afterlife, but it's also closely connected to salvation. So rainbows that they see in the sky, you know, after it rains or before it rains or while it's raining, are always symbols to head in that direction, which, you know, 1 out of every 10 times is a good idea, but you only remember every 10th time when it was a good idea anyways. So that's all.
Cool.
Yep. So we hear the hero.
Yeah. The Percival is his name. He's a knight who's raised up to be a knight, comes from a British tradition, and his forefathers carved out a nice series of estates, and they've been pretty prosperous. One of the things that his forefathers did that he has really continued is the indigenous people there. There was one tribe in particular that were non-hostile, and they embraced them as brothers, and developed really cooperative ways of working together, and it was carving a society out of the wilderness. So, we're talking about a feudal system, where they tried to build a cooperative community, farming, husbandry, trades, crafts, artisans, and but they had a real strong chivalry ethos, and Percival takes his responsibilities as feudal lord seriously, and there's honor, and they have a strong martial tradition, training all of his charges for military action. So the farmers, the masons, the bakers, their kids all have to go through training, and they are. It is a fierce tradition. There's a strong emphasis on education. There are tribes, indigenous tribes, that are hostile. So there's been a tendency, a need to build fortresses and protect their livelihood. And but Percival in particular was very curious, and his father, they were prosperous enough so he was able to get tutors, and he learned. He just has a voracious capacity for learning, and he has built schooling has been part of the they assume that kids have to take part of their time for military training, but also education, and he's kept a real eye on certain anybody that shows a real spark of intellectual capability, and he's built a kind of a highly trained elite cadre of operatives, and his father taught him this, and he is chafed under the notion of this glass kind of monopoly, and he always says monopoly power is threat to liberty. And what he's done is he began forming this kind of a secret intelligence, an intelligence network, and he would train his people from his estates were highly sought after because they're well trained, they're educated, and he's been trying to get them to ingratiate themselves and infiltrate themselves into the glassmakers to learn the secrets,
right? And
with the idea that this knowledge should be for everybody. Well, then when Morgan introduced the sand speeder and the polar wave technology, this just went into hyperdrive. He wanting to get some of his people on the inside of his. So you've got these highly trained martial type, highly educated, intellectually elite types that are fanning out across as as kind of like a secret intelligence society. Think Jesuits, like in the medieval times, the Jesuits were like the bearers of information for the Catholic Church.
Right.
And so he is, anyway, his intention though is to open up the whole economic system to the larger population, that it wouldn't be just controlled by the people that have the secrets, keeping all the power and all the wealth. So that's his, anyway, I'm hoping that he'll be the hero of the story. But he's definitely got an agenda here, and it's clandestine because, people with power, with the secrets, they don't want to give it up, right?
Right. So because I'm thinking about this premise that the glass forge sort of put out, kind of like a come one, come all, come alla, like a bounty basically on either a land path, basically a ship path, the Northwest Passage. They want to get to the other side of the continent. They want to find if there's more of these lakes. I mean, if there's more of this sand.
Right.
I don't really like the idea of them just like being able to use the sand speeder though, because then they could just like traverse. It'd just be like, oh well, we'll just go to California then. That'll be like 3 hours. All right, story over. So that's why I kind of like the idea of the sand speeder being more on the glass forge side and less on Parsifal's side. Parsifal?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course the sand speeder, Morgan is the guy who made the span. He's on the glass side because he has highly motivated to keep his secrets.
Right.
Yeah. So
here's an idea to, I don't know, maybe mix the two. Perhaps they are using the sand speeder or a sand speeder. So if Percival has this agenda to try to find some of this other sand to make his own so that he can break this monopoly, right? So let's say because of his education and his team, part of his team gets brought in on like a team that Morgan, and I don't know if we assigned a name to the guy that kind of owns the glass foundry.
Guy?
Yeah.
The glassmith. So basically they're looking for, let's say, closer avenues. And I'm thinking too, what you could have is, so they're sending expeditions or a expedition, west to see if they can find, on the other side of the Mississippi, somewhere in the Great Plains or out that way. I don't know how fast this speeder is, but I don't know, kind of like to think that it's, maybe not all that fast, but it's, because of its mode of travel makes it efficient.
Right, I guess.
But perhaps, they're basically out on a search. So it's not like they're just buzzing to California, because I'd say maybe at this point, they know there's more land out there, but, most expeditions haven't gone too far past the Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
Because, you kind of have this Mongolian or like half like roaming steppe people, like they just kind of roam and raid and, they're all on horseback. And so a lot of, settling doesn't go that way unless you have kind of an inroad with one of the tribes there. And so nothing has really gone, let's say, west of the Mississippi much. And so perhaps they're going to use this sand speeder. I don't know. I'm just like thinking of like this prairie boat as they're like gonna like just buzzing about the prairie looking for more of this sand. So you're gonna have like this crew of people, and like half of them don't trust each other because of course you have Percival and maybe some people from him, and they have their secret alternative motives of unmonopolizing this. And then you have groups of people in this expedition that
right,
are
exactly,
fiercely loyal, and so they're all like playing each other to get different bits of information or quote unquote work together, because they need the skills that everybody else is bringing. And
they're all against they're all against the European nations who also have their delegation,
Right. I'm sure they have their delegation because it's the people that are loyal to the glassmith here, don't like that they have to answer to the big wigs over in, Paris or Amsterdam or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Where that has been consolidated. Rome, let's just say, let's keep it with Rome. That would seem pretty central to the Mediterranean and, everything else. And so, let's say they might have some of these reservations towards that. So, they're looking for a way to basically get their own supply. So they're not having to get something from the old world, but at the same time, they have their own vested interests. Everyone's got their own vested interests. So there's like certain things they can come together on. And then you have like, let's say the marauding, bandits of the plains. So you have, all these like, I don't know, hordes coming against them at times. And then they try to board the ship and they're, have to fight them off and, make their way through, let's say, uncharted territory as they're looking for these stands, maybe trying to find, other tribes, listen and like learn what's going on out there so if they can hear, like the legend of El Dorado. Maybe that's what El Dorado really was. Maybe it was farther, west. Maybe it was up in, like the like Grand Canyon area where you had, something else. And maybe instead of really gold, it's really this other sand type stuff. So someone that knew what it was might have transmitted as gold, so something like that. So I think, I don't know, in my mind, I think it would still be kind of neat to have like this kind of sand schooner that's just kind of able to like sail across the prairie really, but not making it so, let's say, fast that they couldn't, let's say, just buzz away from, let's say, the steppe people. They'd still have to, get around them and fight or something from time to time.
Right. Maybe it could go that fast, but in order to make such a long journey, and they can't hold like enough sand in order to make the journey quickly, so they have to go just like 5 or 10 miles an hour.
Oh, right. Like and that would still be pretty fast. Even,
it would be pretty fast.
Some of the natives have like because when the Vikings first started coming over, there was one of them that transmitted a story of, and that's why when the Spanish came over, they all like bowed down to the Spanish in some places, is because if you listen to the stories, they were like, oh, these blonde-haired like white men came on these magic rafts. They were going like what it alliterates out to is like 12 miles an hour. So they were just speeding along, on these rafts that just sped across the top of the water. But, really it was 12 miles an hour. But, for ships, that was quite an amazing feat at the time. And really, if you think about it, they're describing a longboat having come down the coast far enough. And then they said they'd be back in a reed year. But chances are is whichever these Vikings were just never made it back to Europe. And so then it was like, 300 years before the Vikings came.
Right.
Not the Vikings, the Spanish.
Before they came, yeah.
And so they're like, oh, we've been waiting for you. And it's like, oh, you have? Yes, you've returned. They're the gods. And like, ooh, this is a nice opportunity. It's like, how's come you are not very muscular and you don't have blonde hair? Oh, well, let's not worry about that. What was this weird gods, right? You're going to show us where the gold is.
Reed, do you want to tell us about the hero sidekick?
No, that's me.
Seth, do you want to tell us about the hero sidekick?
I do want to tell you about the hero sidekick. So the hero sidekick's name is Eric, and he comes from, the northern part of things. He's, comes from the Viking tradition of things. So, but through kind of famine and cold weather has kind of pushed him farther south looking for work. And he meets, is it Percival?
Yeah.
And he joins up with Percival as kind of a vassal of him. So he's, got, knowledge on how to, navigate by the stars and kind of his Viking tradition mixed with a little bit of his, the Native American stuff they picked up, from being on this side of things. So he's, very familiar with the plants and the, flora and fauna and, how to get around and some of the other native tongue and
right. So where Percival Percival and his band of people are kind of still very European, the Vikings have kind of taken to the native way, as it were.
Gone native.
Right. I think something that, when you were talking about the prophecy, something I had in mind too with something like this is like how, let's say, religion and science would develop, in some cases very independently from, how far on the same track or if not independently from what Europe had going on. And I don't know, kind of a fun idea then would be, well, what if kind of under the same thing where you had the natives kind of looking forward to the Vikings coming back, but what if that kind of held sway? And so when the Vikings were coming over, being they were some of the first ones, a lot of the natives took to that same concept and then kind of, brought it in as if these were like the messengers or like the arm of the spirits and the gods coming over.
Right.
And then they kind of adopted a lot of the Norse mythology and kind of mixed with their, nature spirits, great spirit, kind of whatnot. And then they just kind of reallotted, this idea then with, turning, the great spirit into, Odin, the father of all things, and his, kind of, I don't know how it would all look. I'm not, but I think, that's something that, maybe we've seen happen. So almost like a messiah to the Indians is like the, maybe like that's kind of what's come up as like Thor or Odin has become kind of the, this arriving messiah of a lot of the native tribes when they've come over, and they've kind of integrated the,
I like that.
And so that let's say cult of things has almost taken more of a root hold than, or at least in the North, more than, any of the other predominant, religions at the time. Not that other people aren't bringing over some of their stuff, but again, at this point, I would say, the Reformations haven't started either. And early enough on, a good amount of Europe hadn't been put under the control of the church yet either, or the Catholic Church.
Right. So we should figure out what the great conflict is going to be. I have part of me feeling like maybe they should hit something that then makes them go south, and they find the Mayans, and I don't know, they find the Mayans using and creating Aztecs first, whatever. Correct me if I'm wrong. They find the Aztecs basically using and creating glass themselves, using the sand around their pyramids, and that's where people are introduced to obsidian.
Yes.
A glass created from some material that people don't know about, but then also reinforced with like sacrificed blood.
I was going to say that would be an interesting twist on why they were sacrificing people.
Yeah, that it could go that route. It could go that they make it to the Rockies and there's something crazy there. My brain kind of thought about the idea that they are traveling, and they're traveling at night, but it's nighttime and they aren't able to see the Rockies, obviously, but then they wake up, right? And the sun is coming up, shining over the mountains, and then like at the edge of the mountains you start to see like a rainbow light. So there's something like way up in the mountains they need to like go and find, some temple, relay station, ancient civilization, something.
Built with giant crystals that refract this light into rainbows.
Right.
Ooh, that would be like the fulfillment of the prophecy.
Yeah. Or they are able to create, maybe they're able to create matter out of energy, or maybe these crystals are basically the same kind of thing, except they're made with, this could be the thing that the sand speeder operates on, very small crystals, depending on how they're made, I'm just trying to find the bad guy or the goal, because if it's just to explore, then this could be like a multi-part series where they like go down and see the Aztecs and then see the Grand Canyon, and there's something crazy that needs to happen there, right? Because there's a lot of uranium in the Grand Canyon, so what happens when you turn uranium into, what sort of crazy glow in the dark awesome thing could you get when you turn uranium into glass, and then you go to the Rockies, and then you go up into the Great Forests, and then you cross the Rockies, and it's like that's, it could be like a Little House on the Prairie, except fantasy medieval. So you understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to find the crux of the.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of like almost like like you just said, like where it's like Morgan's heroes and their adventure with Bigfoot, and they find themselves up in like the Pacific Northwest as I don't know, not that they have to find Bigfoot, but almost more like a multi-series adventure thing. The kids read all the Tintin things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, where it's kind of a lot of the same characters, and they're kind of drug along in these like fantastic different stories. And a lot of them have little bits to do with each other as they build different things up. But
yeah, exactly. And this would be kind of the same thing. Well, with the kind of end resulting goal of it's like the glass people have the goal of like, we want to find a steady supply of this sand. Percival and his people, they're like, we want to find a way to sort of upset the authority and like, remove the hand that, remove these chains. Well, and so we're like on this quest to help you find this sand, but we're also on this quest to sort of see if there's something that we can get for ourselves. There's a couple of the natives and the Vikings who are all kind of, feeling very, matching things together with the prophecies and, sort of on their way to try and, realize what this prophecy might mean or try and fulfill it or try and understand it.
Yes. But the potential, the tech potential, literally with, creating new, lighter and stronger materials, it's just primed to step into an industrial revolution kind of a thing.
Right.
And especially, with cheap, efficient transportation, at least potential for cheap, efficient transportation, it could create a power imbalance with societies around the world.
Right.
And I'm thinking like the Mayan technology. There's always been one of the great civilizations whose secrets were lost, so to speak. And Montezuma and the Aztecs were trying to like rebuild that the glory of the ancients, but they didn't know the secrets, and so they went off into like Montezuma's strange demonic human sacrifice mode, trying to tap into the power of the ancients, and it never quite worked. And Cortez shows up and rallies the villages and the tribes around and defeats Montezuma. Well, we've arriving on the scene as they have, they've maybe created a pathway to rediscover some of these secrets, and it's connected in some way with the pyramids is this thing that keeps showing up in Egypt and in the Yucatan Peninsula, and with the rainbow prophecy, I see a potential storyline where realization of human potential that is different from the way we experience our world.
Yeah, part of me was thinking it'd be the kind of the idea of forebears, the forerunners. It's like there's this kind of always this idea even in our religion of like people coming, doing things, and then leaving. But what if they came, did things, and then told people that they were gonna, like they did tell people they were gonna come back. The Vikings told the Native Americans that they were going to come back in one standard reed year, but then they didn't.
Right.
So what if we weren't the only ones who said we're going to come back?
Just humor me. What's exactly one standard reed year? What was that all about?
It was whatever the high priest said a reed year was.
Oh, okay.
It was not that there probably isn't some larger understanding of it, but it was like one of those things where it'd be like, it'll happen in one reed year. And so like, how do we know a reed year? Well, we have to ask the priest. And the priest looks at this is what has to happen when they come back. And they kind of like, well, it hasn't quite been one yet. The last one was 600 years. How about the reed year before that? Well, it was 36 years before that. Well, what was a reed year? Well, it was like...
it's whatever he said it was. Now stop asking me questions.
Pretty
basically. But that's what I'm saying. So what if we see these... Basically, they are trying to uncover these things, and they kind of turn into archaeologists, right? As they realize, as Percival kind of puts his head together and realizes and uses the kind of simple knowledge, the simple wisdom of a native, but someone who hasn't got their brain filled with what they think is science, who relies on simple tradition and religious astuteness in order to understand the world. basically by watching the traditions that the native Vinlanders and the Vikings, who have been basically intermarried and become the native Vinlanders, how they kind of follow ceremony and do things, he realizes that the way that the quote-unquote gods talked is the same way that he talks when he would conquer an area and then tell them that he was going to be back and they better make sure that nothing has gone awry, right? It's the same kind of thing. And then he finally gets a first look at the small glass forge that's inside the sand speeder, which they're using to test different materials, and they use to test the sand that they find. And he realizes that this tech is way beyond them, that the glass forge's mints weren't made, they were found.
Ooh.
Right?
Yes.
As like he talks, they were able to whatever with the Mayans or the Aztecs or whoever, and he realizes that they're not creating this technology. They're trying to get this old technology to work. They aren't the ones who made these places. Their ancestors made these places in time out of mind, and they're just trying to keep it going, as it kind of like, hits this thing and then hits that thing and then hits that thing. And then finally they make it up this mountain to this station, to this rainbow thing, and they use both their gathered it's like a trifecta. They use the glass and sandsmiths gathered technical information with the observed understanding that Percival has, with the esoteric wisdom that the native Vinlanders have, and it all kind of combines together to move this giant pane of multicolored glass into a different array and fire and redirects the sun and fires it off into space. Cool. Maybe it opens a portal for them to go through. Maybe it just sends a message, but whatever it is, it
makes a rainbow bridge.
Yeah,
and they step onto it and they find themselves on a space station.
Yeah, a space station or on Asgard,
Yeah.
Or in heaven, or in what's the one that you get through by doing good fighting?
Valhalla.
Right?
Yeah.
Or they find themselves, what's Earth? Midgard. Yeah, so they could find themselves in a number of different places that would be familiar to a number of different cultures, because the point is that that's who these quote unquote gods were just people from other planets. Maybe the Earth, before time out of mind, the Earth was part of a great, huge multi-planet, multi-galaxy federation, and then some great thing happened and everything restarted, and now they're just kind of catching the bits and pieces of it as it kind of, like how every year that you plow a field, you have to remove rocks.
Right, because the
things
frost
just kind of shift up to the surface.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same kind of thing. And they're seeing now, like, who's to say that this world isn't our world in 100,000 years? Like,
yeah.
We say when the Vikings first discovered America, but the Vikings could have discovered America 100 times.
Yeah. Like the theory of the Kensington runestone in the middle of Minnesota was that the glacial inland sea, they were able to sail into it by coming around, like into Hudson Bay and sail right down into the middle of the country,
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Ancient Lake Agassiz.
Right. So either, it could be a lot of things. It could be either they finally connect with the other people, right? Or they send their message up and then, it sends down a bunch of giants, frost giants, and they have to fight them off, and they get the information finally that like, oh no, Midgard was intentionally severed from the network because the frost giants have like pretty much reigned supreme and everyone else is stuck or dead. And then they just like reawaken the network, and then all of a sudden all around the world, things start coming down, and then, it can move its way onto another book, or it can move its way onto just kind of a fun ending. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
This world is possibilities for lots of stories.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
It would be it'd be a fun alternative history. I really do enjoy alternative histories.
Yeah.
As far as stories go, because they offer so many different ways to sort of look and see what we've done. It's like, well, if we had just changed how we had acted a little bit, could we have significantly, if we had listened to Tesla more?
Yeah. Or heated William Penn. William Penn, when Philadelphia was like 3 houses, he met with the local tribes. I don't know if they were Senecas or what they were, but he just taught them his theory, the brotherhood of all man. And they had, for a long time in eastern Pennsylvania, they had a real close fellowship relationship with the natives, and if could have maintained that as an alternative approach to instead of subjugating a people, embracing a people as brothers.
Right. Exactly. Well, I feel like this one's pretty much wrapped up. Do you guys feel the same way?
Yeah, I think it leaves more open-ended for lots of other adventures to happen.
Yeah, this one right here will be like a 10-book series.
My original plan for my unique vehicle was that it was going to be a space vehicle. That just didn't seem to work out with the whole medieval motif.
That's all right.
Okay.
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this last episode of Wait It Gets Better. This is the last episode of this series. Of course, we're going to be back next week. How crazy would that be if I decided just to end it all right now? That would not be a good idea. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love to hear about it. My email address is waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. My Twitter handle is @getsbettercast. You can let me know on either of those things if you thought the story was good or if you thought it was terrible. I can take it. I'm a big boy. I can take the criticism. If you didn't like this story, I encourage you to tune in next week where it definitely will be better than this one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.